Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Low Budget Review Show. I am your host, Eric Smith, and today I am talking about Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, and this is from Tor. Tor is the publisher, or Rot if you're looking at it backwards. So, Legends and Lattes is what is known as cozy fantasy. And for the too long didn't watch people, 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved this book. Um, so there was a controversy not long ago, at the time of this recording, about cozy horror. Now, I've always been, relatively speaking, been familiar with cozy mysteries. I've read cozy mysteries. My mother loves cozy mysteries. It's her favorite type of book to read. Um, and then, right around the time this book came out, I heard of cozy fantasy. And then shortly after that, I started hearing the term cozy horror, which became a whole thing. People were screaming, horror can't be cozy. Big controversy. I suppose that's all neither here nor there. I have read at least one horror novel that I think fits into what is considered cozy horror. I loved it. But this would be my first cozy fantasy. I wanted to give it a try. And as I said, absolutely loved it. What's this about? You're asking. I've been rambling. So this is about Viv, who's an orc, and she's tired of the adventuring life. And so basically, this is the easiest nutshell ever. A retired adventuring orc opens a Starbucks in a fantasy world. That's basically it. It's about Viv opening a coffee shop. So the book starts at the very end of Viv's last battle. Like it's the last swing of her weapon is where we start. And then she walks off. This is like the cold open, the prologue, whatever. And then chapter 1, she's approaching this village where she has chosen to open a coffee shop. And so we meet our cast of characters. We learn about this village. We learn about the book is filled with the different types of fantasy creatures and things. And it's Viv. She finds a place, a location, a storefront to where she wants to make this coffee shop, and then it's her hiring people, finding people to help to refurbish the place, do this, do that, etc., etc. There is almost no action in here. There's the tiniest bit. And of course, there are speed bumps along the way. But the writing just flows so nicely, and the characters are absolutely wonderful. Viv is a great main character. She hires this lady here, who is a succubus, if you couldn't tell. And my personal favorite character is Thimble the Ratkin. I think I have that name right. It's been a couple of weeks since I read this. But I love Thimble, and again we just meet different characters along the way. There are some stumbling blocks, some roadblocks that Viv has to overcome, but not really in the sense of there aren't great sword fights and chopping up beasties and all that kind of thing. It's absolutely definitely cozy fantasy, and I loved it. It was so good. And this does include a new bonus prequel story, which is the adventure that Viv is on when she first has coffee. I was going to say discovers coffee, which I don't want it to sound like she is the discoverer of coffee. She goes to a coffee shop, um, but she's never heard of it before. She's never had it before. But there is action in that story because it is an adventure that she is on with her crew. Um, there is another book coming up that I believe is a prequel called Bookshops and Bone Shards, and I cannot wait to get it and read it. Um, yeah, I don't know what else to say. Again, I don't want to give away the plot points, the nuance, the different. There's just the characters are also interesting and likable for the most part, and even sort of the despicable characters are at least entertaining. Um, but this isn't some grand adventure. This isn't Lord of the Rings or Dungeons and Dragons. It's just a really nice, fun, well told story with wonderful characters. I don't know how else to describe it. 5 out of 5 stars. Um, I just enjoyed it so much. I didn't want to put it down. Uh, I didn't stay home from work to finish it, although I'd like to. I'd like to stay. Well, I'd like to stay home and read every day. Um, but yeah, it says on the back a novel of high fantasy and low stakes, which essentially is what it is. Low stakes, versus again, say Lord of the Rings. But for Viv, it's a very important endeavor that she's on. Um, yeah, I'm not sure what else to say except I just can't recommend this enough. Legends and Lattes, Travis Baldree. Trying to read it backwards. Um, Fantastic. So a question for this video. I know I've reviewed a little bit of fantasy here and there. So so we've probably talked about this, but I'm going to ask anyway. Are you a fan of fantasy? What type of fantasy do you enjoy? And is a cozy fantasy something that would interest you? As for me, I do not read as much fantasy as I used to. I used to be into it much more in my younger days. I did read The Hobbit, did not read The Lord of the Rings, could not get into it. But I've read other fantasy series. I do prefer more pulpy stuff like the Conan books. I've read tons of Conan stuff and Robert E. Howard stuff. Uh, I like the more adventurous Dungeons and Dragons type of thing. And obviously, I have no problem with cozy fantasy. There is a bit of a turn now. We're getting, there's grimdark fantasy as well. I believe James A. Moore, his series is considered grimdark. And I'm pretty sure Warhammer is all considered grimdark. But there's a book coming out. It should be on its way to me right now because I backed it on Kickstarter. Except that I got an email 6 days ago, that it was shipping. But when I click on the tracking number, all it says is that a shipping label has been printed. But anyway, I don't know when this is going to arrive, but it is a book of fantasy horror stories, and specifically sword and sorcery type horror stories. Brian Keene is in there, Joe Lansdale, Cullen Bunn, who put it together. And I've seen some other stuff. I think there's another book that I backed on Kickstarter that is fantasy horror. Or that one might have been Western horror. But anyway, horror's getting its tentacles everywhere. But that interests me. I mean, there's some horrific things in fantasy anyway. It'll be interesting whenever this freaking book arrives to see what angle these authors take to make it not just fantasy with maybe some horrific elements, but actual fantasy horror. That interests me. That was pretty rambly, I think. I like fantasy well enough. I used to read more than I do now. This cozy fantasy was fantastic. Can't wait to read some fantasy horror. What about you? Let me know in the comments below. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here at the Low Budget Review Show. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter, I refuse to call it X, is at Rona5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, is Eric Smith 5757. That's Eric with a K, ERIKSMITH 5757. If you happen to be on Blue Sky, you can find me at elsmith.bsky.social. For those of you who don't know how to find Blue Sky. That's it. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith, and until next time, read more books.